So somebody just missed 15 minutes of the lecture, but it's recording now. Shoot. Oh well. There we go. So, but there are a couple other things with the Civil War that were revolutionary towards the press. One was because you had these correspondents going around covering the war. Some of the generals didn't like it. They thought they were kind of in the way, and I can kind of see that. I could see if I was a general and I was responsible for a battle, and these reporters are running around, I might think that they're a nuisance too. So some of the generals asked President Lincoln, you know, will you get these people off the battlefield? And Lincoln said, no. He said it's important that they're able to cover the war. It's important. But what Lincoln did was he established a system of accrediting them. So if you wanted to cover the Civil War, you had to kind of apply and say, I'm covering it for this paper, and then they would give you a credential. And so only the reporters who were credentialed by the government could report on the war. That's a system that is still used today. It's probably been modified, but when I was a reporter, I covered Congress. I had to apply for accreditation and I had to wear a badge around my neck or I couldn't enter certain rooms. But with the badge, I could enter a surprising number of rooms because I was there to cover a story. And so credentialing or accrediting reporters happened during the Civil War. We also talked a little bit about Matthew Brady and the photography. We've talked about that in other chapters. The Civil War brought us war photography as well. There were reporters for both the North and the South, but there were far more reporters for the North than the South. For one thing, a lot of newspapers in the South got destroyed. So combat reporting has been an American kind of tradition since the Civil War. Moving forward to World War II, oh, by the way, your book talks about there was some censorship during the Civil War. You had to submit your copy and they were able to censor it. They didn't want certain information getting in enemy hands. World War II, there was a free press that also there was an office of censorship, and you had to submit your copy to that and they would take certain things out. But there was a little bit of freedom. Different generals felt differently about that, but some of them, you know, really believed in the power of the press to help bring an end to the war. General Eisenhower was the Supreme Allied Commander, and he believed in the power of the press to inform the people and thought that helped end the war. Vietnam was probably the most freedom the American press ever experienced. They were credentials to go along, but they had very little censorship. They literally could film things and then type them into our living rooms. And there was, you know, just a lot of freedom. And eventually that coverage, you could argue, helped turn the public against the Vietnam War. And so the government was a little more skittish after that. And in Grenada, there was a tight control of the press. That was a very brief military action under Ronald Reagan, but they really, really controlled the press because of the fallout of the freedom of the press in the Vietnam War. When President George W. Bush launched the Iraq War following 9/11, he didn't want to necessarily follow Ronald Reagan's style of controlling the press or censoring them, but they also had to take care of them. It wasn't like, in World War II, they had the front lines and the back lines. If you were on the front lines, you knew you could be shot at. In the back lines, I don't know if you guys have ever seen MASH or shows like that, you were relatively safe. Well, in the Iraq War, there were no lines. You were just in danger everywhere you went. And so they couldn't just have, maybe they could have, but they didn't want reporters just running around and getting killed. And so they embedded reporters in with the troops. So if I'm with the troop system and I go to a certain region, reporters came with us. And that's an interesting system. It gave them a little bit of freedom, kept them safe, but you also have to wonder, were they too close to the troops they were embedded with? But that's kind of a really quick history of war reporting in America. I mean, we could spend a month on each of them. But combat reporting has kind of evolved over time. And I kind of included it in this section, in part because the book did, but war reporting has a potential to affect the whole globe. And so war as a libertarian test for, okay, you believe in your freedoms, but do you mean it when you're at war? Okay, I don't want to bore you with too much history. History is one of my favorite things. But to just give you one example from World War II, you can't tell the press everything you're going to do, right? Because you're going into battle and you don't want the enemy to know that you're going into battle. So I get that, but you also don't want to squelch them too much. Well, there was actually an episode in World War II where we were about to engage in a battle, and the reporters were asking Dwight Eisenhower, who was the Supreme Allied Commander, questions about it. And he finally got fed up. Now, it was a different day than today. I don't think anybody could do this today. But he got fed up and he finally said, well, you know, the truth of it is we're going into this country and we're going to invade and we're going to do it in a couple of days. Now, you all keep your mouths shut. And as the story goes, none of the reporters actually reported it until after the battle occurred. That's very different than today. I don't think you could, that was 1940s. I don't think you could do that today. That would be on Instagram in a second. So there are some people who want online global reform because they think, you know, the internet needs some controls on it. Who could tell me what they know about WikiLeaks? The book talks about WikiLeaks. What's that about? Anybody? Anybody from home want to take that one? What can you tell us about WikiLeaks?
The stuff that I've heard about WikiLeaks is that it was kind of like an online news source that was kind of breaking news stories on stuff across the country, and their owner slash head editor released a bunch of classified documents and is currently in a pretty big legal battle with the US, I think.
That's exactly right.
That's about what I've heard.
Thank you. Yes, the person who did that, he did steal classified or got classified information about America spying on its own citizens and other things. And he thought that maybe America shouldn't be doing that. And he decided to release the aspects of that he didn't think would hurt anything in terms of, you know, he didn't release, you know, where troops are or anything like that. But of course, America did not appreciate their spying system being revealed to the world. And so WikiLeaks is all about the age of openness and leaking things so that people have the right to know. My brother one time, because I teach this stuff, said, was that guy right to do what he did? Like, I don't know. Who am I to be the arbiter of what's right? It does seem to me that our government was doing some spying, that they weren't following the rules. They weren't getting warrants. They weren't and they were spying on people maybe they shouldn't have been. I probably would never have stolen classified documents and leaked them. It would have scared me to death. But was a greater good served? I don't know. I don't think that's for me to really say. What do you guys think? Do you think that there's some movies about this too? I wish we had time to watch more movies in this class. I love watching movies on this topic. What do you guys think? Do you think he did a good thing? Or do you think, America's trying to kind of prosecute him? He's in legal trouble, and he's in another country kind of staying away. What do you guys think? Anybody? What did you say? I'm sorry. WikiLeaks. Yeah, Julian Assange, the guy who. That's okay. Well, that's okay. I mean, I think I kind of am torn on that one myself. I kind of think the government's mad at him because he revealed something they didn't want known. But did he harm America? Some people think he did, and some people think he didn't. I tell you what, I will sometime in the next week look up some of the movies about this, and I'll send you the titles. So if you want to watch them on your own, they kind of raise some of these questions.
I think that it personally was a good thing. I think it's going to come into light is the same way that the Edward Snowden stuff happened.
Yeah.
Within, I know this year, a municipal court, or not municipal court, a court just passed a hearing that pretty much agreed with Edward Snowden, said that all of the things that he released were already illegal things. So the government shouldn't have been doing them in the first place. So he didn't release anything that wasn't in like a good sense. So I feel like it might come out the same way.
Yeah. There's a couple good movies about Ed Snowden too. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's good insights. I think, it isn't like the Pentagon Papers case of the 1970s, where Daniel Ellsberg thought the Vietnam War, he got a hold of classified documents that were a history. They really wouldn't divulge anything, except it did divulge that the government lied to the American people about why we were in the war. And when he released it, it helped end the war. So I don't know, depending upon your perspective, and what you find out is an act of, what was his great, there's something about that, it was an act of treason, his greatest act of patriotism. Can treason be patriotism? I don't know. But these are kind of fun, interesting questions. The book talks about some different countries that are kind of, different from us in terms of their media presence and their media approach to media. They talk about Afghanistan and that how Afghanistan is very different in terms of their media building, but they do have media building that supports the state. Our media is not state-supported media in America. The state allows for freedom, but it's not something run by the state. Trans-border media are media, between borders. Trans-border blockages, there's some countries that try to block things coming in, that there's censorship. So, we have an authoritarian government. We don't want your libertarian stuff coming in here. Voice of America, now that is actually state-sponsored media, but people know about it. The Voice of America is a propaganda broadcast station funded by America, and it's existed for many years. And so it does kind of promote one point of view, but it's not, the Voice of America is government paid for, government sponsored propaganda, but it's not our entire system. But we do have the Voice of America. The book talks a lot about Arab media systems, that there are media values in the Islamic dominated region. Al Jazeera was a news source that was developed after the 2001 September 11th terrorist attacks. And so media can be used as a democratic tool, like in our country, but it can also be used as a totalitarian tool. Islamic radicals can use the media to spread their message. They use technology well. And so that's one way, one use of that. Dubai Media Incorporated, the book talks about that too, and about sort of an Arabian Hollywood. And so you might look over those pages. It's kind of interesting to look at different systems within different countries. China does not have the same system we do. They are more of a totalitarian, or at least a authoritarian government. And they have censorship practices within their internet. And so they heavily monitor that. So, you know, basically the internet is global and does not have a lot of restraints on it. There are some people who want to put more because they think that there's too much freedom. It's kind of like the Wild West. But other people don't want it. And who's in charge of the internet? Really nobody. And so there's a lot of mass media, different nation states that use the media differently. Some try to control the internet, some don't. Some are pushing for online global reform. War is seen as a libertarian test. So you think you're for freedom. Well, are you for freedom when we are at war? And it kind of depends. One of the things that we'll see is that America espouses values it doesn't always live up to. Because who does, right? We're people, we're human beings. We don't always achieve everything that we say we want. For instance, the Bill of Rights was adopted in 1791. They gave us the right to religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. And just 8 years later, 8 years later, Governor Adams signs into law the Alien Sedition Act, taking away your right to criticize the government. He did that because they were afraid of war. So at various periods in our country's life, security has caused us to sometimes think about whether or not we want all our liberties. So that's security sometimes causes the libertarian type of media to question freedom. But ours is still pretty much intact, I think. And democracy is a harder act, I think, than totalitarianism. You have somebody in charge, anybody doesn't agree with me, you're all gone. That's pretty easy, as opposed to, we're gonna give everybody a right to vote and they get to decide things. That's hard, that's a hard thing. So that's a real quick glimpse into that particular chapter. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody at home? We got done even earlier than normal, but I think that's okay. Okay, well, I'm gonna shut off the recording, and I'm gonna everyone at home can sign off. I'm gonna clean the seats, And make sure you do forums 11, 12, 13, 14, and read the chapter, whatever the next chapter is for topic 11 for Tuesday, and have a good weekend. Don't forget, start doing your study guides. The next test is a week away. It's like 8 days away, something like 8 to 10 days away.